Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hay rides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.
Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden and increase the curb appeal of your yard. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. I love talking about houseplants, especially houseplants that are safe for your pets. And having both plants and pets around you helps you feel less stress and improves your healing process. Plants also help purify the air and remove toxins such as benzene, TCE, and formaldehyde. So join me today as I talk about some less known pet-friendly houseplants. One of the things that has happened over the years since I've been involved with horticulture is that the number of houseplants that are pet-friendly has increased. And this makes me happy because this means that we have more plants that we can have available in our homes. Today, I will be showing you only a few of what I call the lesser known plants, but you can just go to the ASPCA website, and that's aspca.org. And what you can do when you're on their website and on their homepage, you will see in the upper right-hand corner, you will actually see a search function. And all you have to do is put in the name of the plant. And once you have the name of the plant, the listing there will tell you whether that plant is toxic or non-toxic to your dogs or your cats or even horses. So what I did is that I actually pulled out the Calatheas. I'm going to talk about this a little later, but I pulled these out, and when I pulled them up, this is the page that came up for me from the ASPCA website. Now it said prayer plant, and I had actually typed in, as I said, Calathea. But I'll be talking about these Brazilian beauties in a minute. And what it told me was the scientific name, the family name, but the most important, which is toxicity. And so if you read there, you'll see that this is non-toxic to dogs, non-toxic to cats, and non-toxic to horses. And they do include horses as well as cats and dogs on the website. So let me start with what I like to call the Brazilian beauties. These are all technically prayer plants. I'll be speaking about each one individually, and we'll just move this little plant to this side, which that's actually one of my favorite plants, and I'll be talking about that plant a little later. But what does it mean when it's a prayer plant? Well, the prayer plants are actually found in the rainforests, not only of Brazil, but also in Central and South America. And in the rainforest, they're constantly moving, they're constantly shape-shifting. And they give you a little dance show. And it is just amazing to watch these plants. As a matter of fact, you may think that it's your imagination that you're seeing them move, when in actual point of fact, they really are moving. And so the first two that I want to talk about are the Calatheas. And these are both Calatheas. And this one is known as the Rattlesnake Plant. And so it shimmers when it's trying to find the light, or when it's trying to get dark, it just starts shimmering and kind of starts moving around. And all of these plants are plants that need moderate light, but if you have low light, they can adapt to the low light, but they do actually prefer the moderate light. And then this one, I like to call this one the pinstripe. And if you look at the leaves, you will just notice not only do you have little striping on these leaves, but, and this is true with the rattlesnake plant as well, there's purple underneath here. And it just, this one has a little pink in it as well. And actually, if you give it too little light, sometimes that little pink will recede, but otherwise, it's a very gorgeous plant and one that I highly recommend. Now, another one that is, again, what I prefer to call the Brazilian beauties. And these are all in the Maranta family. And so the difference is this one here, this is a Maranta. And when people come into the store and they say, I want a prayer plant, this is the plant that they're actually thinking about. And this plant is amazing. We can't show it here, but I brought a couple pictures that might help you understand how this plant operates. And I'm like a little kid. I will actually sit there and watch this plant in the evening hours. Now, the closer it is to sunrise, the lower this plant gets with its leaves. And the plant really does spread out this way with its leaves. It just gets low. And when I first saw the Maranta, I couldn't really understand why people would come in and say, I really want that prayer plant. And yeah, they like the rattlesnake and they like the pinstripe, but they really wanted this one. Oh, did I mention it's also called Peacock Plant? And if you look at the leaves, you can see that it's almost like a peacock. Well, what happens in the evening hours is that the plant starts actually rising up. So I have these two pictures, and the one is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in my house, the one with the door open. And so it's not quite dark, and you can see that the plant is starting to pull up. What it's starting to do, it's starting to go into prayer motion. And then the other picture is a few hours later, and that plant is getting taller and taller as it's going into the prayer position. But the one thing you do need to be cautious with, especially with the Maranta, is that it doesn't like it if the temperatures in your house go below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So do keep that in mind. I mean, the rainforest is a very humid place, and it's a very warm place. So that this, I could speak for hours about just how I just watch it. And it's fun for your kids because they would just be in awe with how it just goes from that flattened position into that prayer position in the evening hours. And the third one, again, which I prefer to call the Brazilian beauties, is the Stromanthe Triostar. This one is slightly different in that it grows very, very erect. This one in nature, wouldn't believe it now, and even in your home, if you have it long enough, can grow 2 to 3 feet tall. It likes a lot of bright, but indirect sunlight. And again, if you give this a little lower light, it still will do well, but it'll lose a little bit of the coloring that you have here. The leaves won't be quite as variegated. And what does it mean when a plant needs a lot of humidity? Well, one thing that you can do is you can take a spray bottle and you can just mist over the plant. Another thing that you can do is that you can use these plants as interior decorating, perhaps in in your bathroom so that every time you take a shower, then you have this incredible humidity, which these plants love. Or you can create a humidity tray. And they do sell some humidity trays, which are trays that have little steps on the inside, but I just prefer to get this tray pot or pot tray. And then what I like to do is I like to get what I call river rock. And it's very important. This rock is very, very small. And you can use marble chips, you can use river rock, whichever you prefer. But I don't recommend that you take the rock from outside. If you do decide to use any outdoor rocks, then please be sure to sanitize them with bleach and water. 1 part bleach, 10 parts water, because if you don't sanitize the rocks, you could be bringing in things that can infect your plants with a fungus or even insect larvae that as soon as that insect gets into the house and feels the heat, or insect eggs, they'll hatch, and next thing you know. So what I recommend is to take your rocks and be very careful because these rocks can be very dusty. So you just don't want that dust. But if you look here, I have not filled the entire tray. I've just put the rocks about halfway or 1/3 of the way up in the tray. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little water and I would add water to this tray. And I add just enough water to dampen the rocks, but not really cover the rocks. Because you don't want your plants, if you're going to use this as a humidity tray, you don't want your plants sitting in the water. That could cause root rot. So then all you have to do is take your plants, these plants from the Maranta family, and just put them on this tray. And as they're sitting on this tray, they're getting their humidity. They're very happy. And please, because they come from the rainforest, don't put them in a part of your home where you have a draft. The one thing about the Stromanthe, this can get dry at the top. So the top can dry out and you're fine. But the Calatheas really prefer to keep their moisture throughout. And so that's one of the things that I recommend if you have a very dry house, or perhaps your house is fine regarding the humidity in the summer months or spring months, but in the winter months, as soon as you turn that heat on, you don't get enough humidity. So having a humidity tray is a great idea. And if I didn't mention this, the more plants you have together, they create their own humidity, so the more plants you have, the better the humidity level is for the plants. Now, my next plant that I'd like to talk about is the Ponytail Palm. Isn't this a beauty? Oh, unfortunately, I have what we call a shade house. So I can do the Maranta, the prayer plants, but I really can't do a ponytail palm because the ponytail palm really prefers a lot of bright light. Why? It's from Mexico. And while it's called a palm, it's a palm in style only. It's also called an elephant's foot. When I first started studying houseplants, I actually thought that it was a palm that was grafted on some kind of stalk. No. This is what's so neat about this plant. It's actually in the agave family. This here is its vessel. This is where it stores its water. It is considered in the succulent family. You wouldn't know it to look at it, would you? So this is not a palm at all. But when people say they're looking for something that's a little unusual, that's pet friendly, this is one of the first plants that I tell them to go take a look at because it is so cute, just so cute. And the other thing is that this is what I call a traveler's plant. And you may say, a traveler's plant? Okay, so Misty, what do you mean by a traveler's plant? Traveler's plant means you can take a business trip, you can go on a vacation, you can be gone for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And because this is a succulent, it's in the agave family. It's from the desert region of Mexico and New Mexico and that whole area of southern United States as well as Mexico. Drought is its friend. What kills it is overwatering. You don't want to water this more than 2 times a month, if even that much. And your plant will let you know. The other thing that's kind of neat about this plant, besides the fact that benign neglect is what it loves, is that these edges, sometimes the tips will brown. Now, when tips brown with most of your houseplants, that means that there could be a problem with underwatering or overwatering. But sometimes as this plant grows, it just decides to get brown tips. Doesn't tell me why, just decides. So all you have to do is take a little pair of scissors and just go to the tips and groom it. Give it a teeny, teeny bit of a haircut. Not a lot, just to have it get rid of its tips, or get rid of those brown tips. And then you have a wonderful plant. It is a very, very slow grower, but it is, if you have the right lighting, this is really a plant that is phenomenal. It's so easy to care for if you have the right lighting. And as I said, it definitely does not like shade. So please keep that in mind as you're considering this. Another plant that I like to talk about, this is Fatsia. This is also known as a Japanese Aralia or Fatsia Japonica. And those leaves, look at those variegated leaves. Aren't those pretty? This plant is actually a shrub in zones 10, 11, and it will grow in nature. It is an evergreen shrub, and actually it's zones 10 through 8. Now here in Northern Virginia, we're in zone 7, and technically we're in zone 7A. I have had some of my clients tell me that this plant definitely will grow outside in the yard. So what that tells me is that they have an area of the yard where the microclimate is a little warmer than usual for our area, or as things are shifting, that you may find you have a warm area in your yard as well. And so let me just move this out of the way so we can get the Aralia from different perspectives. But in nature, you're looking at 10 feet tall to 10 feet wide when you're planting this outside. And it's a fast grower. Now here in zone 7 and further up north, it makes for a wonderful house plant. And it is a fast grower. Now in your home, traditionally it grows maybe about 6 feet tall maybe about 4 to 6 feet wide. So this could become a beautiful statement plant. In one of my other shows, I spoke about poller palms and various palms that are 6 feet tall, and people will use them in their home as a statement plant. This could become another statement plant if you're interested. One thing about a Fatsia, the question is always, well, how do I know when to water this? And the Fatsia actually, probably because it's traditionally a shrub outside, actually prefers to get dry about 50%. And what that means is that depending on the size of the pot, this is what we call a 6-inch pot, you would go down about halfway into the pot. And if halfway into the pot is still moist, then you don't necessarily need to water it. But if because the top will feel dry, but if you go halfway down, in this case, this is definitely moist and doesn't need to be watered. The other thing, with any houseplants that you have, they do like to go outside in the summer months. And if you decide to bring them outside into the summer months, then make sure that you put them in an area where you have some shade. Otherwise, too much direct sunlight outside in the summer months can be too much for the plants. And speaking of watering, the one thing I did forget to mention is a great way to keep your prayer plant moist. Let's get the Maranta back here, is to not only keep it on a humidity tray, but you may also want to consider getting a self-watering pot. And what is a self-watering pot? Well, this one may not look like a self-watering pot, but it has, at least this design has 2 parts to it. It has what I call the base, and then it has what I call the actual pot. And what you want to do before you pot the plant is that you want to take water and you want to put it in the base of the plant. And you don't want to totally fill the pot because we have that old scientific rule of water disperses. So what you want to do is fill it about halfway. Of course, as soon as I tip this over, that you can't really see the halfway mark, can you? But you want to fill it halfway. Then you want to, and actually that's interesting. I put too much water in this. I filled it more than halfway. And here's what happens. You get buoyancy. You get a floating pot. So let's put some of this water back. And let's put it less than halfway. And then the pot fits in there. And you also want to make sure that you get a potting mixture, which, by the way, any general potting mix will work for these plants. And then you just take the plant out of the pot, plant it into the self-watering pot, and that will keep the plant moist on a continual level. Great idea to help when, especially, this is something if you do a lot of traveling and you're not home for a long time period, this is really wonderful. So I would like to talk about one of my other favorite plants is the bird's nest plant. This is the bird's nest fern. And in actuality, I did mention this in my other pet-friendly TV show. And that one was more about what are your common house plants. Well, the bird's nest fern is not common, but it is a fern. And as a fern, it likes low light, it likes moisture. And what's neat about this is that if you look at the interior of the fern, what you'll see is the leaves that are growing here. And this is how this fern grows. It grows from the inside out, and the new leaves are just beginning to unfurl, and that's what makes it look like a bird's nest fern, or a bird's nest. And you have your other traditional ferns. You have your Boston fern, and you have your maidenhair fern that are also pet friendly. But please avoid the asparagus fern, because that fern is definitely not pet friendly at all. It's exciting that there are so many more pet friendly plants that are available for purchase. Plus, these are fun plants to have in your home, even if you don't have any pets. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, and I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hayrides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.